I just kind of think through, the different companies that I've worked with, and I think you and I talked about this before, where we would get data sets where people would say, this is going to be the end of the company. Hey, look, everybody, all the smart scientists essentially had looked at it, and then luckily there were people that knew, hey, look, if we filter the data this way or we look at the data a bit differently, we can you know, possibly, work our way around this obstacle one way or the other. And the nice thing that I'm hearing as well in some of the solutions that Sapient provides is just this capability of, not just using what you currently have, but also having a data set, more or less that you can count on to help you through some of that struggle as well.
I mean, that's so true, Don. There's so much investment that's made in the preclinical context before a therapy even enters into humans, before it gets into the clinic, that we really understand that therapy kind of chemically what it does and then what the safety profile of the molecule is. So once it makes it into the clinic, you don't do clinical testing on humans, unless you're going after a very specific indication and you've defined that indication that's, the disease, and then you write that into the protocol. So when we talk about failed clinical trials, often it's not really the molecule that fails, it's the definition of the disease state that you're going after. So, you're working with something that you already know the safety and you already know the chemical activity, that sort of pharmaceutical activity of it. It's up to you as a pharmaceutical researcher and a development organization to define the disease so that that therapeutic actually demonstrates efficacy. And so a lot of our work at Sapient is in working with companies to really understand how they should define the disease state, which sets up their therapeutic for maximum chance of success. It's also very good for drug rescue, where you have a failed trial, you've already invested quite a bit in the therapeutic and the molecule, and then redefining exactly what the disease is changes, a major profile, both for investors, but particularly for the patients that can benefit from that therapy.
Oh, so important. In terms of balancing your scientific and business aspects of your role, how do you make sure that there's alignment between those two areas?
Yeah, it's a great question because so many of the things we're doing are so exciting. And we observe things all the time that I think would have major impact in areas that are adjacent to pharmaceuticals. So things like diagnostics, things that would really help payers, that would work well for concierge medicine. Um, but we're entirely focused on pharma R&D. And so what I do in terms of bringing my scientific and business aspects together is bringing that knowledge of the pharma R&D process and then focusing like a laser on those areas where our proteomics data and our metabolomics data put together with genomics and transcriptomics, where those are really going to impact a pharmaceutical decision. Another thing that I really focus on is client traction, which means, it's great to have smart people in a room coming up with ideas to help pharmaceutical therapeutics advance. But what we really learn from is where pharmaceutical companies need our help. So that's what I call client traction. You put out ideas, the uses of the dynamic data set, as well as, our advances in our laboratory. And we see where we get client traction. We've gotten client traction, particularly in target identification, in translational medicine, the biomarker identification, and then accelerating clinical trials.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because my mind throughout this conversation has gone both to the diagnostics area, and just how much of this data and capability that you have at Sapient and how impactful that it could be for diagnostics companies as well. The second part that rang true to me in the conversation a couple of different times was just the ability to probably leverage a lot of this information back to I mean, you've probably heard of this before in your life as well. But a lot of hospitals back whenever I was working in hospitals had tumor boards where all the physicians would get in a room and they would review cancer patients and the response that they were or weren't having. And since then, I know that there have been different projects to try and advance that capability. But, again, with a data set like you have, it sounds to me like it could be very impactful to that area as well. So, veering off the lane would be something that would be, tough for me as well. Just, looking at all of the ways that that your data set could impact, the broader world and treatment as well of cancer patients.
Yeah, Don, that's such a good point. The uses of real world data, and real world data is different than clinical trial data. There's really a parallel universe between what is going on in terms of regulatory submission to the FDA to get approval or to advance your therapeutic, and then what that therapeutic does in the real world when it's given in a bunch of different patient contexts, with a bunch of other conditions, comorbidities, other therapeutics given at the same time. And so really sorting out that real world data, and I think the application of advanced analytics, whether AI or just good data organization, that's going to be transformational to how we treat disease.
Yeah, absolutely. Jonathan, what's the greatest piece of leadership advice you've ever received?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, I think a lot about how to help others to build their careers and how to put opportunities in front of people so that they're excited to come to work. So I think one of the best pieces of advice I've ever gotten was kind of a flippant comment from someone that was, "What do you get from this place beyond just a paycheck?" And it really stuck with me. And it's something that I've asked my colleagues and people I've supervised and mentored throughout the years. And here at Sapient, people hear it all the time is, great that you're here. I understand everyone works for money. It doesn't matter how rich you are. Everyone values getting money. Everybody basically likes a paycheck and needs a paycheck. But what do you get out of your situation, either your job at Sapient or what you're doing, outside? What do you get beyond the paycheck? And I think it's a really good way to help people to articulate where they want to go in their career, what they want out of their day job that would give them better experiences for their next job or what they want to do in life. It can be really intimidating for people to sit down and let's have a mentor mentee discussion. Where do you want to go in your career and things like that? So I find that simple question, what do you get from this place, or what do you want to get from this place outside of a paycheck, is a great way to catalyze that discussion.
So it is a very good question because I see a lot of, especially, I mean, inside of smaller companies with scientists, especially because they're so passionate about the science just in general, and so there's so many people that will just grind away, and then the question at the end of the day is, okay, so I understand you've gotten a paycheck, but other than that, what else did you get out of this experience that you're walking away with that really benefits you? And it's funny because I've run into scientists, then a few years later and ask them, so tell me more about what you took away and how did that influence your career? And it's funny because oftentimes these things are building blocks that you couldn't define the day of the experience, but later on, all of a sudden, recovering a drug safety trial or recovering a diagnostic from the brink of disaster, they've been enough down that path. They know, kind of, look, I'm not going to get worked up about the little things. Let's go focus on what we have to do to move things forward and get out of the situation that we're currently in.
Yeah, Don, that's so true. And I think that question, what do you get out of this place beyond a paycheck? It really works looking forward too. And for non-scientists as well, especially like, what do you want to get out of this place tomorrow beyond a paycheck? Really helps people to define what excites them about work. And I think it's a great way to stay inspired.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what inspires you?
Huh.